Hello, my name is Colin Campbell. I'm with Polygon. You're looking at Stellaris from Paradox. It's one of those 4X games where you build an intergalactic empire in a slow-moving, real-time world. It's a grand strategy game from the company that brought you games like Crusader Kings 2 and Europa Universal 4. I guess it's kind of like Star Trek, as a lot of people saying. You start off on a small world, you discover that there's a lot of other small worlds and a lot of other alien species, and you go out and you find them and you build an empire, and of course sometimes you come into conflict with those other empires. It's all procedurally generated. There's these massive galaxies to explore. There's also quite a lot of systems to learn, although the developers tell me that they've really tried hard to make sure that this time around it's not that difficult and that the learning curve is reasonably kind. So Paradox sent me some B-roll of the game, which you're looking at now. I also got on the phone with Henrik Farias, who's the lead developer, and I asked him about the game. And I started off by just asking, tell us what it's all about.
Stellaris is basically our attempt at taking our knowledge of making grand strategy games and fusing that with the 4X genre to make a more accessible game that is not shackled by history, but still contains many of the elements of grand strategy that are familiar to Paradox players, if you will. So the vision is basically to make a hybrid game. It's a 4X game, at least in the early parts, and then it kind of becomes more and more of a grand strategy game that you would expect to see from Paradox, basically, more like Europa Universalis. So
we went on to talk about the combat and how that works.
Combat is fairly abstract. Your fleets line up against each other and fire away, and the ships maneuver individually. There's a lot of fireworks going on, and it's really beautiful and pretty, but you don't have direct control over each individual ship. Basically, what you can do once combat has started is you can make an emergency jump and try to get away from it and retreat. So it's visual and beautiful, but it's not tactical.
So there are a lot of sci-fi worlds, a lot of sci-fi games. What does this one look like?
I see this game as, if you extrapolate human history, we made historical games, but if you extrapolate human experience into the future, what will it be like? So when we go out there, if we discover faster than light travel, it's going to be a wondrous big universe to discover. So I want each new game to feel new, which means that we've focused heavily on making everything in the game fairly random or semi-random, procedurally generated. The trick with that is, of course, to keep the level of immersion you have when you're playing a familiar entity like Russia or France, who you can feel attached to when you're playing one of these alien races in the future, basically. So that's a huge challenge, but we try and solve that through the storylines. For example, we have in the game that you will come to know at least who it is you're playing, even if you don't know them from the start. In games of this type, you probably expect to be playing against the same 10 or 12 alien species every time. We're not doing that. I want you to be surprised every time you start a new game. You should not know what's out there in the galaxy, and that's why we don't have any, pre-scripted species as such, or major species. We have quick selections when you start a game for yourself, but you will never meet any of those familiar species out there. Of course, there is one exception to that. And that's if you're playing some aliens, you might actually meet us, the humans.
I asked Henrik about resource gathering and buildings and technology research.
Planets are, inhabitable planets are basically abstract tile-based maps. So you place your population units, a bit like you would in a city in Civilization, to work a tile, and then you can build a building there to gather certain types of resources, and you can, of course, upgrade the building slot. So that's what you do on your inhabited planets. Then you can also build installations in space, like you send a construction ship to build a research station or a mining station around some planet or asteroid or sun, or whatever. You can also build military platforms. There is a tactical layer to this, in that you know that enemies will arrive around the edges of your solar systems, and if you can predict which direction they will come from, you can build a military platform there with a minefield or a warp interdiction module or something like that. Of course, all these installations cost money, so our base resources are energy credits, that is money, minerals that you spend to build ships and installations. We have influence, which is a diplomatic resource that you use to claim solar systems and to recruit leaders and so on. We also have quite a large number of strategic resources that are unique and are used to build rare modules on your spaceports that will allow you to build better ships and so on. You can also trade them away with the other empires.
Stellaris is planned to come out in 2016 for PC. I asked him last of all, what do you do in this game? What makes it different? What makes it interesting?
There's so much stuff you can do in the game. There's so many little details and cool things. We have uplift of individual. You might meet a pre-sentient species like a gorilla-type alien that lives on a planet. So if you have the right technology, you can genetically modify them so that they become like aggressive super soldiers, or they like living on desert planets where your own population doesn't like to live. We have Star Trek-like federations you can form for a mutual victory with a rotating presidency where the president has control of a Federation navy built of the best modules of all the member species. You can meet fallen empires that are actually fairly big at the start of the game, but they're stagnant and don't research technology anymore. And perhaps most importantly, you have these science ships traveling around, like the Enterprise almost, with a science officer in charge, and they're having little adventures. It's like branching little storylines. If you played Crusader Kings, it's a bit similar to that, the little events that pop up. So the early game is going to be about exploration and about playing out these little adventures and quests, and then the game will turn more into Europa Universalis and grand strategy game. And in the late stages of the game, we have some special challenges that you probably haven't seen in other types of games. For example, there's something we call a late game crisis, which is when one of the empires has started using a dangerous technology or a risky technology. The most obvious one, for example, would be delving too deeply into AI research and starting using robot workers on your planets. Yes, they're very efficient and they never complain, but there is a small chance that they will actually revolt. And this is a galactic crisis because they can bring in the AI workers from other empires as well. And so you will all need to work together to beat them. Or if you want to gamble, you can risk that they will destroy your biggest enemy in the galaxy, and then you will take them on if you think you can do that. Of course, all these crises, there are many of them, are basically snowballing, so the longer you leave them alone, the harder it's going to be to beat them. So the idea is basically you should not know that you have won and lose interest in the game, because the game will throw challenges at you even in the later stages. Part of that is also internal mechanics within your empire. You have these population units that you assign to work in factories and so on. They might grow unhappy and form factions, and you can deal with these factions in different ways. You can treat them harshly and send in the armies, or you can meet them halfway and accede to some of their demands. Some of them might want to separate from the Empire entirely, so you'll probably see a lot of civil wars going on in the galaxy and fracturing empires and so on, even in the late game.